Good morning. This is Nancy. I'm in my studio and I want to show you a little now or never technique. This technique is called a quilt facing. Now there's a couple of reasons that you might want to put a quilt facing on a quilt instead of a binding. So let me just show you a couple of examples. So this is a binding where you finish your quilting and then you put this little 1/4-inch binding all the way around the quilt. This is standard. This is how the majority of quilts out there are done. But then there's a technique called a facing. A facing comes from garment world, honestly. So here's just a garment. And when you look at the neck of this garment, you see there is not a binding on it. So a t-shirt might have a binding, but generally speaking, a dress is not going to have a binding. It's going to have a facing. There's the back side of it. This is a facing. Also, Kristen, this is your dress that I've been wanting to fix the hem on for a long time. I swear I'm going to get it done. All right, so let's put this to the side. So here's a couple of quilts that I've done some facings on, and I want to show you close up. So to do these, I need to get the phone from the camera from Athena. So, all right, I'm gonna come over here. Take the phone from Athena. All right, we're getting pretty good at this whole camera transfer thing.
Outside the fact that I had my thumb in.
Okay. Oh, excuse Athena's thumb. All right, everybody say hi, Athena. Hi, Athena. Okay. All right, so this is a quilt that I did. This was a guild challenge we did. It was called Home is Where the Heart Is. So it was really cool. And I did a lot of fabric painting on it, a lot of embellishments. So there's silk ribbons here. There's some paint up in the tree. That's a whole thread painted tree there. So love this quilt. So the rules is that it could not have a binding. It had to have a facing. So it also had to have a little piece that laid on top of it representing your home. So this is my representation, big word, of the home I grew up in. And so when you look at this, you see there's no binding around the edge. Instead, it's a facing. Now this particular facing was done in 4 parts. So I had, let's see if you can see it. So 4 different pieces of fabric going around. Then I flipped it to the back side and sewed it down so that the edge is finished and there's no binding. Right? I also did that on the main portion of the quilt. So here it is here. And right now you can't see anything because it's black. For all you know, there's a black binding on it, right? Until you flip it over. From the back side, you can see where this black fabric was brought over to the back. Now I'm going to talk to you about making cool designs on the back of your quilt just for fun. And in this particular case, because I had this really cool fabric with these big designs on it, I decided that my facing would go in and out and just kind of follow the design of that backing fabric because it was so cool. So in this case, the facing was just because it needed to have that finished quality. And I think the first time I saw a quilt with the facing was at Quilt Festival in Chicago, probably 12 years ago. And it was at an art quilt exhibit. And because the quilts were faced instead of quilted, they looked more artsy. Another reason why you might want to do a quilt facing is because you don't have square edges. So this is a quilt I worked on a year or so ago. It's called Fizzy Wigs or something like that, and it's all hand-dyed and hand-painted fabric that I did with a gel press, which I'll talk to you about sometime. But on this, do you see the balls on the end of it? So these here, I couldn't do a traditional binding. Well, okay, that's not true. I guess I could have, but it wouldn't have been very fun. So instead, I did a facing. So now let me flip this over. And so this is the facing, and those are, I love putting just gentle curves on the back of it just because it's interesting, and you can see how this facing goes all the way out to cover those 2 balls on there. So the project I'm going to work on now is just this little sample. I was practicing with some new dies that I have, and so this is a little seashell die or clamshell die. And when I put them down onto this top, it didn't come out exactly even, so I couldn't do just a traditional square binding. I needed to come up with something to disguise the fact that it wasn't really square. So to start off with, I first kind of drew lines as to what I wanted the general shape to be. But then here is a curved line that I stitched down. Now you have to stitch this down on the top of the quilt if you're going to stitch it from the bottom. Now that'll make sense in a minute. So I stitched this on the top, and when I flip it over, you can see that line of stitching. So I stitched it with a bright colored thread so that I would be able to see what I was going to sew later. All right. So now I'm going to give the phone back to Athena. All right. So Athena and her thumb now have the phone. All right. So, hi, it's me again. All right, so this is the little quilt. I've done that line of stitching, and so I've done this kind of curved line of stitching just because it's going to be fun. Now I'm going to take the fabric that is my facing. So I've got a full fat quarter of fabric, which is just the perfect size. I'm going to place the right side of the facing fabric onto the right side of the quilt top. Going to lay it down. Now I'm going to make sure that the fabric covers all of those design lines that I stitched. So here's that design line. Yep, everything's covered up. Now I'm going to put some pins in from the outside. Coming around. When I get this done, all pinned on, we're going to go to the sewing machine. And I'm going to stitch this all the way around. Almost what some people might call the pillowcase method. So I'm going to sew it all the way around and then turn it right sides out. But I'm not going to leave that space. So when you're making a pillow, you might leave that little 5-inch space at the top of it so that you can turn it right side out. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sew all the way around and show you how you actually then can flip it to the other side. All right, so I'm ready to go to the sewing machine. So Athena is going to get down from where she's at, and she's going to hold on, and she's not going to fall. And then she is going to meet me. There we go. Oh, and there's Ryder Cup is here watching us today. Hi, Ryder. He's like our little fan club stuff. So I'm at my sewing machine. I have a simple thread in, and I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to sew from the back side. Remember that line of pink stitching that I did? I'm going to sew just inside that line of pink stitching. So this might take me a little while, so please be patient as I sew. Let's start here, and I'm going to just be sewing just inside that line of pink. And I, on purpose, made it be these soft little curvy guys, because one of the cool things about doing a facing is that you don't have to just have square edges. You can literally have any shape you want. Now, I did not come up with this idea. Like I told you, the first time I saw it, I was in Chicago, and it was at an art quilt exhibit. I think that one of the quilts in that exhibit was from a quilt maker, and I hope I don't slaughter her name now, so please forgive me if I do. It was Vicky Pagnatelli, something like that. She's an art quilt. She's an art quilter, and she's also a teacher. I've never had the opportunity to take a class with her, but I've known many that have, and they said she's just wonderful. One of the techniques she teaches that you might see occasionally is called ghost quilting. So she takes layers of similar fabrics and makes them look like they're sheer overlays on each other. And then on the edges of her quilts, she will create really random designs, points and curves, and really, really cool. And then she does this spacing technique on the edges of them. So I think it's Vicky Pagnatelli. I think she actually has two last names. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. I should have actually researched that before I started talking about her. So I'm coming over here, and then on the bottom of this little quilt that I made, I actually made it straight because that was the one part of those little clamshells that was straight. So I'm gonna come here, so a straight line. got caught up there on something. I think one of my pins was in the way. Oh, there it is, yeah. Okay. And pivot around. Come on up here, and then that is where I started. So that didn't take so long. That was kind of cool. All right, coming to the end, right there, and gonna cut it off. All right, so now I think I'm gonna take the phone from Athena as we go back to the table. All right, here we go. Yep, I've been keeping my studio pretty clean. You should be very proud of me, Meg. All right, so Athena is back up there. Oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to go back this way. Okay. All right, so coming back around. All right, so now I get to take the pins out. And because I have curves on the edges, I need to trim this using pinking shears. Now, pinking shears in garment world is what we use for when we're wanting to make curved edges. So on the facing of that dress, there might have been a pinked edge around it, and that allows the curve to happen easily. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. This is my super cool pair of Craftsman pinking shears that I bought in an antique mall one day. I'm going to take and cut this very close to the edge of my stitching. Right. Now, pinking shears are notorious for not working very good. I don't know if you've ever had a pair or if you've used a pair, but they just don't work as good as we would like. So I'm going to fight my way through this, and then I'm going to show you another idea. So you see how it leaves that pinked edge? Another idea is to use a pinking blade on your rotary cutter. So now, I'm not sure if I'm going to get through all the layers first time through. It's taking a lot of muscle. Oh no, I just ran over a pin. That's a bad thing. Okay, let's try this. Come around to the edges here. Didn't go through all the layers, which is typical. Get back over here. Truth is, I'm not exactly sure how old this pinking blade is, or this wave blade. I think technically it is. I've had it for some time. So it might behoove me to get myself a new pink blade. I probably, again, should have thought about that before we started this video. Best laid plans of mice and men. Take that part off. Just a little bit more to go. Bear with me. And I'm also like slightly worried I might actually cut through the stitching line. So, whoa, came kind of close there. All right, so I got through that. I'm going to put my cap on. On the bottom edge here, I'm just going to cut that with a regular rotary cutter. Then I'm going to take my scissors, and on this sharp corner, I'm going to cut a little bit of a niche there. Do the same thing on this other sharp corner. All right, so we talked about how with this technique, it's like making a pillow. So I put two layers together, right sides together, and then you turn it right side out. Well, with a pillow, you leave that little 5-inch opening, and then you turn it, and then you hand stitch it on the back. You could do that. That is possible. But then you lose the opportunity to do these kind of fun curved designs on the back. So this is how you do that. You take a pair of nice sharp scissors, you pick up the backing fabric, and then you just cut right through it. So I'm going to cut it just kind of curving, and I like to do curves because I like that when I turn this edge, a curved edge is easier to turn than a straight edge because you've got bias edges. Coming around. And I've actually done this like on this big yellow one. That was a large piece of fabric on the back. And then I didn't start cutting in the middle so I could save a little bit of fabric. So you can, you know, this big piece here, you know, I could use that again. All right, so now you see the quilt top again. Now I'm going to turn it right sides out. So put my thumb right there in the corner, poke it right on out. So if you've ever made a pillow, same idea. You're just turning it right sides out. Then I would take and I would carefully push all of my curved edges out. Next thing I would do from this is I would take it to the ironing board, but I'm not going to bore you by ironing it in front of you. But are you ready for that? Oh, then from the back side, you'll take and turn these edges. Just give them a little turn and hand stitch that, so like hand applique it. So you can see how this is going to create like a whole little frame on the back of it. All right, now I'm going to turn it to the front. Ready? Look at that. I've got no binding. I would take and in my pressing, I would be sure that that backing was all the way to the back side, but now I have that gentle little curved edge going all the way around. I might actually do a line of top stitching on there. I might not. Kind of depends on how it turns out. So there you go. That is how you do a quilt facing. So remember, you're going to use a facing on a quilt instead of a binding for a couple of reasons. One, for the artistic look of it. It just looks cool. Two, because you have an edge of a quilt that is not square. Now, it doesn't mean you couldn't do it with a bias binding. It just means that it's a little bit of an easier way. And people look at it and they think this is a complicated technique. It's actually easier than doing a bias binding. At least I think it is. So that's how you put a facing on a quilt. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Just FYI, it is still cold in Michigan, and yes, it is after April, but it'll warm up next weekend sometime. So have a great day.